Alright people, so we're going to go ahead and get started on actually applying some of these painting techniques. So remember that this is what this looked like before you started. Apparently my video needs to catch up. There we go. So this is what it looked like before you started. Remember, we blended for the sky, we did some lighter paint back here, some darker over there, we did some wet on wet right on this edge, and now we're going to go ahead and overpaint on that. We're going to apply some dabbing to our trees, and then some sponge paint to our bush. So we're going to go and see what that looks like. So right along this edge, we're going to do some overpainting, some simple overpainting to get started. So overpainting is literally exactly what it sounds like. You're painting on top of something. So a lot of times with shadows and things like that, people like to use black. And honestly, I really don't like to use the color black. I like to choose a dark color, like dark blue or dark purple, and I feel that adds a much better color. So I just loaded up a detail brush right now, and I have a little bit of purple on it, and I'm literally going to draw a line right there. And it doesn't have to be a completely solid line, but I want to show that there is a difference between these two mountains. So I use purple. I'm going to use a little bit at the bottom to show that. And notice how my line isn't perfectly filled in, and I'm cool with that. It's also a dry brush effect, just like that. So now you really see a separation between those. If I wanted to, I could take some overpaint and I could show some dips, maybe some change in color, just like that. But there you go, the basics of overpaint. When you're creating your own picture, please make sure that, I think someone mowing. Please make sure that you fill in all the things so that you can't see like numbers like you can see here. For this one, it's a practice, but for your final picture, make sure you don't do that. Okay, so let's move on to that sponge painting. So everybody loves using the sponges, but a lot of times we use the sponge incorrectly. So when you're using the sponge, you want to make sure that you paint directly on top of the sponge, and because you want the texture of the sponge, not a perfect circle. So what you do with this color is you take your paintbrush and you paint lightly directly on top of it. You can mix two colors on here, that's totally fine, but the point is that you're putting a light application of paint on here because you don't want a perfect circle. So I have those two colors now. If I want to, I can practice it on a paper towel or something like that, but the point is I want that texture. So I'm going to take this, and now I'm going to apply it to my tree area. If I don't have enough paint, again, I take the paintbrush and I paint it on. I do not want to see a perfect circle on these sponges. If you have a perfect circle when you're using the sponge technique, it does not count as sponge technique. It just counts as you painted a circle, which isn't one of the recommendations. So there you go. I have that sponge technique now. And whenever you wash this out, make sure you go down in the water and you squeeze. So, and always make sure a sponge is empty of water, like you squeeze it out, like over the water bucket though, squeeze it out. Because the worst thing is to have a watery sponge. Alright, so our last thing that we're going to work on is dabbing. So dabbing, I know y'all are like, woo, dab. That's not exactly what we're doing. So again, I'm going to do some color mixing. I have a little bit of blue, a little bit of green, a little bit of yellow, and I'm literally going to push down on my paintbrush and pull up. That's what dabbing is when it's talking about painting. So push down, pull up. So by loading two different colors on top of my paintbrush, I'm actually able to add a lot more interest in what I'm doing than if I just had one color on there. So I can show kind of a highlight on this side, and then on the other side, if I take a little bit of that red, so those complementary colors, we talked a lot about that today. So take a little bit of that red and add it to the green, I'll darken it up. So there you go. And just like that, you dab. And remember, whenever you're doing most of these painting techniques, except for wet on wet and blending, you need to have a color underneath first before you paint it in. Because if I were doing this dab technique right now, and I didn't have a color underneath, you'd be like, well, you can see so much of the paper under it. Like, look at the difference. So I have this one, say for instance I came in here with this one over here, and I just started to dab. Like, I've got so many leftover white areas, and if I start to fill those in with the dabbing, you don't see the technique anymore. You're just painting it in. So make sure you have a color underneath. And the last one I'm going to show you is some dry brush. So dry brush means you have just a tiny bit of paint on your paintbrush. You actually can wipe most of it off on a paper towel, and then you're just showing texture with it. So I'm doing a little bit right down here in that water because I want to show the texture in that water, just like that. All right, people. So we are done with our painting technique sampler. If you have any questions, let us know.